Gentlemen, we're going to start to my right, and we're going to go around. Feel free to answer the question as succinctly as possible. What role does colonialization play in the shaping of Bermudian black male self-image? What role does colonialization play in the shaping of the Bermudian black male image and psyche? I guess, Dr. Liu, I'll let you jump right in. I'll let you jump right in. I know you can manage it.
It plays every role. It plays every role in the context of, first, economic control of not just young black men, black people, period, on this island. You have no control of the economics. It has, in terms of the political structure, colonization plays a controlling factor as a colony. And if you want to use neo-colonialism in a crown colony, you're still a colony. So it plays that role. Then you think of it in the context of the judicial system. It controls that, with 98% of those who are criminalized in this country as black males. And yes, we may debate and argue what they are there for, but the judicial system is dictated and controlled by the colonial infrastructure. Then we talk about also media. We don't need to say any more about that. Your Royal Gazette, your Royale Gazette is an indicator of your colonial information base and how that controls the psyche of black people, of people, period, in a colony. And of course, last is education. And I gave it in that order because if black people in this country are going to build community, there are those 5 pillars that must be added to build community for black people. And I'm one who believes that there is no black community in Bermuda. We have black neighborhoods.
Well, certainly that's a good start. Let's go to Colonel Lamb. Simply, you brought the piece about institutionalization. You said 98% of our individuals incarcerated, specifically at the Westgate Correctional Facility, are men of color. Certainly we have Colonel Lamb here. Colonel Lamb, can you jump right in? I'll repeat the question. The institutionalization of young black males in Bermuda, what role does colonialization play in the shaping of Bermudian black male image?
Firstly, I agree with everything Dr. Simmons just said, but I think one of the lasting legacies of the colonialization of Bermuda is one of our psyche as people, as Bermudians, blacks and Bermudians. And the everlasting psyche that has been passed on to us because of colonization is that we think that the foreigner's ice is Kuroda. And by that I mean we suffer from an inferiority complex.
Let's stay there. You've just opened up Pandora's box.
Which is why I came here.
It's wide open. So you're saying culturally, we have low self-esteem.
Absolutely.
And it's based on the philosophy of individuals that are off of these shores that come into us are naturally better and more gifted.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can draw from many experiences from the Bermuda Regiment, where when we brought in folks, their word seemed to have more value and worth than locals. And I think that has permeated throughout our community, where I've always been a proponent of the fact that the answer is in our room. We are capable, talented people as a country and as a people. But one of the legacies of the British Empire is that we have been conditioned to think that if they don't sound like us, they are automatically superior to us. So, and that's real talk.
Let's now transition to black males. What is then the effect of the colonialistic structure, the mindset on black males? And that can go back to Llewellyn, and then we go back.
Let me jump in for a minute, Mr. Moderator. Yeah. Dr. Lamb, or Mr. Lamb, Colonel Lamb, I'll give it to you, touched on the black psyche. One of the characteristics of a colonial state is the idea. Crawford Young, in his book, The African Colonial State, talks about those 6 or 7 characteristics of a colony. Bermuda is so profound in the sense that we continue to perpetuate the idea of inferiority. We perpetuate it. It is perpetuated throughout our institutions of influence. Historically, prior to integration, 1960s and 70s, black people were competent, were confident, were able to sustain themselves based on their talents and skills. When integration came, not only did we integrate, we assimilated. We actually bought the ideas of the colonizer. So fast forward to 2016, our way of existing in many respects is based on the idea of those institutions that have influenced us.
Mercy.
So we have to do some soul searching in terms of identifying what is our idea in this colony? What do we gravitate toward? What is the central theme? And I want to move this thing in terms of solution.
I'm going to get to Mr. Bode. You want to jump in really quick?
I just wanted to jump in, really quick.
Feel free.
Yeah, just really quick, Mr. Keynes. So I think I'm just going to stir the pot just a bit. I think the late, great Bob Marley said it best, you know, in order for us to emancipate ourselves, you know, it's up to us. You know, he said it best. So I think if we want to change the image of young black males in this country, it's up to those in this room, you know, to have an impact. Yes, colonization has an impact on how we view ourselves, but if we really want to change, the future is up to us. And so the work that you do in Somerset, you know, in the prisons, so that's where we're going to see the change at the end of the day.
Suppose I would say that is very noble, but awfully simplistic, and some would argue naive, because there are individuals actually out there who do not understand what is actually taking place to put us into this position. What would you say is that it's almost the kumbaya thing is nice because it soothes it makes everything quiet, but it does not deal with the issue at hand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be quiet at the end of the day, but I mean, if you look at the positive black men that we have in society, 9 times out of 10, a lot of times, is that they had a role model to look up to. You know, for me, it was my father. You know, it was at PHC. You know, I had strong coaches within PHC, within the club, and that's who I looked up to. And a lot of times, when you don't have that positive image to look up to, you know, that's where we fall short a lot of times.
Mr. Webb?
Yeah, I kind of disagree with some of the comments when it comes to the effect that colonization has on us, and especially us as young black men. I, for myself, come from a lifestyle of prison and father, you know, not having any mentors, no father, and I believe that we have everything that we need in this country to be successful. I believe that we make a lot of excuses and we blame a lot of things on why us as black men or men in general are in the state that we are in, instead of taking full responsibility for why, you know, for the condition we are in as young black men. So I don't totally agree with the comments of, you know, how colonialization affects us. I never went to college. I don't have no doctor in front of my name or no colonel. I graduated from high school and smuggled drugs all my life. And it took for me to clean up and believe in myself, you know, to be successful, you know, and I just believe that, you know, yeah.
Let's stay here. Let's stay here. He brings up, I think, very interesting perspectives. The two gentlemen here share very similar philosophy, and their philosophy is the answer is within us. Let's not focus so much on the past. Let's take where we are for where it is, and let's push forward. Over on the other side, I see individuals who says, in order for us to get to that point, we have to have a full understanding of how we got here. Gentlemen, how do we mesh, how do we deal with this point right here? We're just two different philosophies based on a critical problem that exists in our community.
Well, I believe it's, I believe it's a, it is? You all hear me? All right. I hear the philosophy, and there's no, I don't see it as any different from the rest of us. It's framed in the context of their experiences, number one. And when I think of it in the context of, if you want to talk about resolution and going forward from where we are, you see, I have my successes in the same context of the colonization that's been your life, been all of our lives, but I haven't allowed it to deter my progress, right? Whatever my progress has meant in terms of my academic or my business interests or whatever. So I'm aware of that. But again, I'm not oblivious or naive, or nor am I saying that you are or anyone else is, that when we hear, I'm giving an example. When we give the example, and I just listened to something in the presentation that was just before us. I think it was Dr. Melvin Bassett who gave an example of the reproduction of this on the psyche and how it affects black males, whether it's black males at my level, beyond, or even young black males who we represent as role models, you see, because even if you don't go up to their person as your role model, they're looking at you. So when I listen to the example and the question that Dr. Melvin Bassett posed just now, and it hasn't been answered yet, but I frame it in the context of my reality of growing up in Bermuda. I've seen they reproduced over and over and over and over again as a black man in Bermuda. You never have enough experience. So how do we multiply the worth and value of that for us? Your skills, my skills, each other's skills to build the community and success that moves us beyond the barriers that we believe handicap us from moving forward. I believe these are the things that black men and women need to be doing in this country. Regardless, yes, of colonization. The institutionalization of that oppression is real, but it doesn't stop us from cooperatively working together, multiplying our skills, developing our own economic wealth, right, to fund the things that we feel is necessary for our growth and development.
I'm going to go to Mr. Bassett for his point, and we're going to make it granular. He articulated that the post for the Education Commissioner is available, and we had qualified Bermudians who were trained, who have the educational experience, who have actually served in the acting capacity, and who were overlooked for the post. So they've met the criteria for being the cadre of the capable, the competent, and the prepared. They were overlooked. Was there something, or is there something based on Colonel Lamb, who said the outside ice is colder? What effect does that then have on the psychology or the psyche of males in this country if they see the best of us getting overlooked?
Okay, I believe that us as individuals, we need to do it ourselves. I started my own business, and I'm in business 16 years now. Successful business. Won Best of Bermuda Award multiple times. And whatever, and I have a few businesses, and whatever to add to, and I listen to a lot of dialogue and conversations, even when we was at St. Paul's and there last night, and it's like, why don't us as individuals come together and instead of saying, okay, well, they won't hire us, or this place won't hire us, or they won't support us, we have the power to make things happen ourselves. Even with the question you had inside earlier about the bureaucracy. Like, I was working in government for a couple years, and we had this initiative. We was getting out in the communities, and we was getting all the guys that are involved in the gangs. And And what happened, we had all these meetings and we found out what the young man wanted, and then the meetings just stopped because of all the bureaucracy and red tape. So what I done in turn was went out and I got jobs myself and hire guys in whatever community they live in. I was hiring, I still do it, I hire guys in whatever community. We find the work, we hire guys from that community. So I look at things in a way of, instead of us looking outwardly and looking at things injustice or blaming, why don't we as individuals be the change and be the difference that we want to see or we want, you know, to occur in our lives and in our communities and in our country.
Let me jump in for a minute, Keynes. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I contest. We compliment you for your success and the effort that you put forward in your personal life. You went through a significant emotional event that allowed you to transform yourself from something to something else. Colonialism is a very complex concept. It's very complex. So people are in different spaces at different times. The fact that you got 5 black men sitting around the table talking about this concept, we all have different views. That's what it brings. To your question about the availability of a competent Bermudian to serve the role as commissioner goes back to the idea. What is it that's wanted? Why is it that we are not perceived as having competent people? Who are those persons making that determination, if in fact that's the case? It goes back to, for me, the centers of influence. What is our thinking? How have we been inculcated to see life from another lens? Because that lens then is then transferred and put out and then compared and determined your success or failure or your competencies. And so we have a lot of soul searching, a lot of work to do in terms of raising our awareness, our consciousness, because this colonialism is an abstract construct. You really can't put your hand on it. It's filtered in our minds, and we all think differently. So our experiences, our personal experiences, allows us to respond differently. When we respond differently, sometimes the responses conflict the situation. Here is where we are. This is our reality. Until we decide, as black Bermudians, until we sit around the table and have this kind of chat, we have that hard conversation, men to men, putting the egos aside, and deciding how we can move it forward is when we begin to make the progress. But the fragmentation has allowed us to stay separated because we have this testosterone, we got these egos, we got some things going on that we're not prepared to have this honest conversation. It's not about being right or wrong, it's about being united as we move forward. That's our charge.
Very interesting. Let's move on. Does our current educational model create a spectrum of male independence that includes independence of thought, behavior, and creativity? Does our current educational model create a spectrum of male independence, independence of thought, behavior, and creativity?
Does it?
Does our educational system that we have in place now, do we create thinkers, doers, people that can actually transform the world based on giving the tools and the skill sets they have been given? Now remember, we're here focused on black males.
In many respects, it's not happening. We're not seeing, let's rephrase. We see pockets of it. And I think we have to be honest when we assess this here. We see pockets of it. Not to the extent that we want to see greater productivity coming from our black males. If you look at the Mincy report, the Mincy report talks about the lack of confidence of black males, talks about black males not being able to find jobs, talks about black males dropping out of school. So from that perspective, no. Again, we may see pockets of it. How do we move it to the next space? It's about a consciousness. I don't care what curriculum you get. We have to begin to remind our teachers, hold ourselves to a standard that says, listen, you have a moral responsibility. As teachers, as an educator, we have to have the moral responsibility to help uplift our people, regardless of their condition. When they walk in the classroom, it's my job to meet them where they are intellectually and take them to the next level.
Thank you, Brian. Let me give you a few perspectives. One of the major successes of the corrections department is that every year we graduate guys with a GED. And that might seem like a success story, don't you think? An adult black man behind bars getting his GED. And that's a success story, wouldn't you think?
Should be.
But I often ask myself, as happy and proud as I am at the ceremonies, what is wrong with that picture? When a boy is 37 years old getting his GED in jail, something has got to be wrong with our education system. And that's a major component of where we are as a people, you know, our education system. And I don't think the curriculum is the issue, you know. I think we suffer from trying to teach children what to think rather than how to think, man. We teach them to color in the lines and tick a little box and paint by numbers. I think it's called learning by rote. These educators can correct me. Learning by rote rather than exploratory manipulative lyrics, I know. But
he ain't telling you his marriage to it.
But the point is, is not so much what we're teaching as it is how we're teaching. And not only that, in talking to inmates, and I'll declare my interest. I visit a school every single week as part of doing the village thing rather than talking the village thing. In support of a number of children across the island. And oftentimes I leave a school with two sets of emotions. One filled with pride and hope, and these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed little termites with hope in their eyes. But on the other side, filled with dread, having listened to a teacher and the way they talk to these children. Filled with dread. And the vast majority of teachers I know are passionate and are doing a fantastic job, but there are too many teachers putting out fires. Plutarch once said, a child is a Greek philosopher. A child is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. And too many teachers in our system, and we have to have an honest conversation about this, are putting out the fires in our young black men. They label them at a young age, and I've heard inmates tell me, so what went wrong, bro? Where did you go wrong in the system? And Colonel, let me tell you where. At P1, somebody labeled me as a troublemaker and separated me from the herd, made me stand outside the class. And then I carried that label all to primary school, to the point where by the time I hit middle school, I had lost interest and done with school. And that's one man, that's one person too many. Against the backdrop, again, of lighting fires in our young man, that passion for learning and knowledge. And again, I teach them how to think. We could be teaching basket weaving for all I care. But how are we making baskets? How can you make your own individual basket to sell it and start a business?
Very good perspective.
Important responses and relevant responses to the question. If I was to ask everyone in this room, and for our guests, just think of it in the context of the talented model versus the Booker T model. What was the difference for a young black male educated between 1956 to 1972 at the Bermuda Technical Institute compared to a young black male, 12 to 18 years old, educated, quote unquote, from 1997 to the present? When you ask the question in terms of the creativity and so forth, that black male, that young black male, educated at the Bermuda Technical Institute, had a teacher that cared. They moved into a new school, allegedly without the cultural baggage. They had a curriculum, vocational tech, delivered with a strong academic foundation. Black men or black males who attended, who first arrived before the selective system kicked in around 67, they arrived at the school to fill a void for the workforce to become tradesmen, mechanics, carpenters, so forth. And you will hear those older black men who were those younger black men state that with the creativity, the hands-on that you speak to in the colony, framed in an individualized model that their curriculum and school structure was, they said they had a successful education experience. But in '72, it was shut down because it is alleged it was successful. Lots of debate. It was really shut down because black males defied the original intent. Their success went beyond just becoming tradesmen. As individuals, they went on to own businesses. You see, they didn't just become tradesmen for the workforce development plan of that era, right? They debunked the myth. With all the creativity and methodologies that the teachers shared with them and taught them and mentored them, and they'll say that their teachers weren't just people who cared, these were teachers who mentored them to the position of becoming businessmen. The school was closed in '72 after 16 years. The school wasn't closed. How do you close a school that was successful? As I argue with them, it was closed because black males succeeded and became direct economic competitors. Number one. 1997 to the present, we want creativity. We have sophisticated school resources and structures. We say we have teachers who care, but are disconnected. And if you want to compare the two eras and trajectories, and the social influences of both areas, both eras were subjected to violence. One with a stronger social conscience. Compared to '97 to the present, and teachers that our boys interface with, who see every day what you're talking about, right, have a disconnect to those boys' reality because, you see, the tech man era, it was of their neighborhood. You don't have that neighborhood experience anymore. You took it out of the neighborhood. And therefore, the people who interface those students don't have what we would say a cultural relevance to the day-to-day experiences of those boys. So I'm of that era, not '97 to the present. I'm in the middle, that gap year, I call it, from '72 to '96, because it's that period where I was student and teacher. So in the context of this conversation, how do we do it? We have to teach our boys as you learned, and not just as an individual. I applaud you, but yeah, you did it with your networks and your God-given knowledge, skills, and talents, but we don't reproduce it. Where did the tech men fail? See, no one wants to talk about that one. Because they were individualized, and they did some of the same thing. They hired some of their own and all that. But I always ask the question, how many of you went back to your community and developed community wealth there? You see, I'm of the era of people, young black men in Bermuda, who grew up when I knew we had a black community of business people in Somerset. I'm from the West End. We had it in North Shore. I can name the black businesses back of town we owned. You may have had the big marketplace, but you had the grocery stores. So growing up, between 58 and 75, I could not shop in Hamilton until I shopped in Somerset. My parents, you got to go to your grandma's if you want your hamburgers or Miss Baxter's or who. You always patronize your own stores first. Why is it we got to go to Marketplace if we go to Marketplace? Because your aunties work there and that's where our dollars go. You You see, so again, that's part of the creativity and the wealth building development of two different eras. I can speak on this later on Friday.
Okay, we're going to, Mr. Ball, and then we'll give Mr. Webb an opportunity to answer. No? Okay, let's move on now. It is said that typically, black Bermudian males exist in female-dominated environment. This is especially true in education. How do young men optimize their value and modeling when much of their day-to-day influences, especially in the school, home, and church, are female?
Me again. I applaud our women in education. They are there, many of them, because they want to be there and they want to do for our children. I would like to see the balanced composition of a man and a woman in our school like I grew up with. That era is done. It's not coming back unless you develop your own independent school and you dictate and determine who's in your school. But we're not going to get those men filling our schools like we did before. So, I believe it's important. This is where men have to step up. You see, Tyrone spoke to it earlier. How many of those brothers he's talking about is going to spend an hour in a school? You see, our children need to see the balanced relationship of men and women working together in their interests in schools. It could be the barber. It could be the correctional officer. It could be anyone. So we invite and call and say, the coach, spend your time in your school, children's school or your club, where they see your presence. And I mean consistently. Not the one-off type of thing for the 100 men on campus. Have a presence every day, because every day there is enough of us to go into a school and give and do something.
Let me just jump in here for a minute, Casey. Colonel Lamb shared with us the statistics in terms of black males incarcerated. 98%. I believe we have to be creative if we're talking about establishing competent black boys and allowing them to see the male image. I believe it's imperative that we become creative and find a way to create a synergy between the penal system and the educational system. The population serving requires for us to begin to find out how do we make the connect. Many of those boys in schools have parents who are incarcerated. And I think we can begin to go to some of the same inmates and find out how is it and what are we prepared to do to establish that relationship. I got a brother right there, he's the commissioner of prisons. We need to be talking about how do we make this connect. If it's on the weekend, sometime after school, so that our young black boys get to see more of their loved ones who are out of the public eye. We have to be creative. We're not going back to the traditional method no more. Dr. Simmons is absolutely right. So we're going to have to negotiate this here with the court system. It's going to require some supervision, but we've got to think outside the box if we're going to make a difference.
Anybody else?
The reality, you asked about basically a predominant woman experience in men's lives. The reality is that many of us are products of strong black women who carried our communities, right?
Which incidentally is a good thing.
Yeah. Look, man, I watched, and my mama was a single black woman raising 3 children back in the day. And so my heroes happened to be my mama and my granny. And you go to school and you painted the picture. The reality is that life can't handle a vacuum. The responsibility is on men to step up and play their role. And that's really the issue, Too many, look, you're going to start me off here, right? Too many men, I drive from Dockyard to St. David's. And Dr. Lou, you drive from Somerset to St. Davis and back. And no, I'm not trying to diss anybody or any of my brothers, but look at the number of men sitting on walls all day long. And who's left to run the household? The women. And they are the ones who have carried our community far too long, even in the church.
Okay, let me go in and say, let's appreciate that our women have been the bearers of this community. And let's give that as the given for this conversation, okay? What we're talking about now is, how do we enfranchise black men to actually take the rightful place in the community and become a helpmeet to actually alleviate some of the pressure off of the women that have been lifting the burden for far too long?
Answer simple. We need more men molding man. We need more of our generation and beyond molding the next generations and modeling what a real man looks like. And that was my point about sitting on walls all day, you know, getting drunk in church. Not everybody. But the point is that there are not enough men. Many of us are playing our roles, but too many are not. And so we have to engage our brothers to make them understand what their roles and responsibilities are, or we're going to perpetuate this madness.
Somebody said something earlier that I would be remiss if I did not address, and that is the disenfranchisement sometimes by women to young boys who oftentimes do not understand the power and the magnitude of their words. And because of critical issues and dynamic issues in their lives, they may bring to bear some negative words that often scar our young men. How do we deal with that unfortunate but very real phenomenon that's existing right now in our Bermudian community? And I'll even take the liberty to say in the diaspora.
Yeah, that's heavy.
I just wanted to say a big part of our problem that is in our community is a direct result of no fathers. The first man that ever told me he loved me was a gentleman, was a big drug dealer that lived in Atlanta. I remember I was in my early 20s, and this man that I hardly knew told me he loved me. And I was sitting in the round table discussion on Monday night. Was it Monday? Yeah, Monday. And I was sitting there and I was thinking of myself, graduated from high school, 4.0 grade point average, and how did no one see my potential, harness that potential, and make sure that I was successful? And I thought that question, and the guys on the street recognized it, and they took me in, and they told me how to smuggle, and they told me how to make money, they told me how to be successful. And the guys, like, I watched Lou Allen and Ward Out. I really appreciate you guys inviting me. Really admired them. They was probably away in college when, you know, when everything hit the fan, when everything was happening in my generation. But I was just thinking, like, how, and now I have a son, I have no trust in the public education system here. I am paying $1,700 for one kid, $1,700 for another kid every month because I don't trust the public education system in Bermuda because I've worked in it, because of the social environment that our kids are now living in. We have boys from up Somerset that cannot go to school in Berkeley only because they're from Somerset, not because they have done nothing. You have boys that have done nothing wrong that cannot go to school in Hamilton. They had an orientation in Berkeley the other day for Somerset kids where they are actually, I thought that to have an orientation for kids from one parish is actually contributing to the division that is already existing. So now I have to spend all this money to make sure that my son is successful. because I don't trust the education system, the public education system in Bermuda.
Profound comments. It takes us back about 3 questions, but it will take us back to our original conversation, but I'm going to give Mr. Ball an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback up or from that point, I think our focus is wrong. And, from a sports club's perspective, I tell, my members this all the time. It makes no sense, if we're developing good football players, if we're developing good cricket players, if we're creating menaces to society. And unfortunately, a lot of clubs, and, I'll point the finger at my club, we create these athletes who are not productive citizens, who are not leaders and who don't stand up and who don't have character. So for me, it's about developing the complete athlete. And that's someone who can navigate in different circles and be productive in this community.
Okay, gentlemen, one of the things that...
1 second, Brother Keynes, 1 second.
Well, I want us to get back to the question, because it's one of those complex questions that we don't address. And I put the question out there because we have 60% of our homes that have been run by females who are doing their best. But there are times when there are certain things that take place. So we can't skirt over the reality of what we're dealing with, and that is sometimes the over-feminization of our young boys because of lack of male role models. How do we deal with it?
Let me say this here. Last night was a wonderful opportunity. Would you all agree? Didn't you have a wonderful time last night? I'm of the opinion that it's about conversations. Conversations. We can't close the door. It's about establishing relationships. And I believe out of those relationships and conversations will come some solutions. But if we're not talking to one another, it's not going to happen. So the success at PHC, and by the way, Brother Bo, I admire what your club is doing in terms of, yeah, you're doing a wonderful job. You do. And I'm a die-hard Thompson man too. No, really. But your example needs to be duplicated island-wide. You need to take that model to other workmen's clubs and share with them what it is that you're doing. Successes and failures. But it's about the conversation. It's about transporting the idea that we have to do it. That this is our moral responsibility. It's not a loud conversation. It's a quiet one. And until we begin to decide to reach out to one another, be sincere about it, we will make the progress. Oftentimes, I believe it's not that people don't want good, I believe they just don't know where to begin. And that in itself is a challenge. So we really have to open the door and welcome our differences. That's part of it. Bermuda's a high-strung society. Everybody wants to move in that space. Many of us don't have time for one another. And so we have to pull back for a minute, decide when and how we're going to conversate. So at the end of this session and at the end of this conference, I'm expecting, and I share with the colleagues on the committee, that we begin the conversation, the quiet conversation. I'm not expecting for it to be in the media. It's not going to work there. It's about genuine people coming together to do for his or her community.
We're running out of time, so I just have a few more questions, and it actually goes right back into where Johnny, Mr. Ball was. How do we challenge our non-traditional educational environments? Tyrone talked about border crossing. I'm specifically talking in this case about our community clubs. To be healthy spaces mentally, physically, socially, and culturally for our young men and young women, but specifically young boys. Again, how do we challenge our non-traditional educational spaces, context, clubs, to be healthy spaces, specifically around mental health, physical, social, and cultural, making them safe spaces for our young men? And I'll go to Mr. Ball in this case for him to start.
I think it's about setting standards at our clubs. Years ago, before my time at PHC, we actually knocked down the club, and the plan was to build this huge multi-sports facility. It would have been great. And it's been said that the fact that we knocked down our club was actually a blessing, because with all the negativity that comes with running a bar, all the anti-social behavior with what comes with that. And unfortunately, I look around and a lot of clubs who have bars, they're struggling with that. They're struggling with not having the standards. So with us, yes, we want a facility, we're working towards that. But unfortunately, with that, with having a facility, you know, it creates, you know, that negativity. So when you have a bar or you have a club, you know, you got to set the standard. And it's, yes, maybe it's a bit easier for us since we don't have the club, but at the end of the day, it's about setting standards for yourself.
Before we go, we've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask for the panelists to make the conversation brief. Really quickly, Johnny, just for cultural context, many of our social clubs, they make their money off of the bar. It's a critical source of revenue. How then do we find, if we deem it a healthy space, how do we create other avenues for our clubs to generate money without depending so heavily on the revenue from the bar?
I mean, for me, it's a focus on young people. And when you do positive work in the community, you'll be amazed at the money that comes in. But, you know, the bar a lot of times is like a drug. You know, once you start getting the quick money, you know, okay, I want to have another party, another dance, another session. But then you slowly see that the standards decrease. You know, the families stop coming. So, like I said again, you know, it's about setting the standard.
Anybody?
Sure. Yeah. The point I want to make is that the success of PAC is that you guys have transformed your club to 21st century practices. That's really what has happened, and I think that's our charge for other black clubs. The charge is, how do you transform your institution to the next level? Which means that, again, you need to identify and recruit competent people who will make that transition. Otherwise, we lose all around. Let's think about it. Most of the clubs which are owned by black people are just that, owned by black people. So there's some real estate value in that. How do we transform those institutions to viable institutions that will make money? My club, Somers Cricket Club, we host a cop match. $125 million in circulation.
Say it again?
$125 million in circulation in the community through a cop match. We're talking about survival. What percentage of that do we really receive? And by the way, for our visitors, cop match is a celebration where we commemorate the emancipation when African Bermudians were emancipated. So it's a cricket game, and folks from all around the world come here to celebrate. So I welcome you to come here next year cop match, and we'll talk some more about it. But anyhow, that's my plug, my advertisement. Yeah. No, but serious. It's events. It's our cultural events which would allow us to sustain ourselves if we, one, identify the appropriate people, and two, do the planning to support ourselves, because that's really what happened back in the day.
I grew up in a very strong sporting club as well. The best cricket team in Bermuda, by the way. That's a fact. But it's a double-edged sword, you know. I grew up without a father, and so a lot of my male role models were in the club back in the day. But the clubs, with their programs, have done some good in the community. We can't deny that. No. They have developed some good men of character, and I think that's a key word right there, developing character. But too often, they have become watering holes. So instead of a man going home to his wife and family, he stops down the club, has a few drinks, and that leads to a few more drinks and is stumbling home at night. Now that's a generalization, I know. But I've never supported the idea of a club relying so heavily on bar sales for its survival. That can't be the way the clubs were originally set up to service the community. And so it's going to take a great deal of effort around the community, from sponsors, businesses, to help clubs to put on programs so that we're not so reliant upon bar sales. It also goes back to nowadays, you have a lot less people volunteering their services in the club who are not working on the committees to put on family functions and other events that are not so driven by the bar. It's that the clubs play, just like the church, a vital role in the development of our young men through sports, but it takes the whole community to make a club successful.
Just to answer your question, it was Mr. Ball, for him to say that. I remember when I was traveling overseas, coaching a few places in Europe, and everywhere we went, it was places that was nowhere as wealthy as Bermuda, professional clubs, amateur clubs. And the one thing that was common throughout all of the young clubs were the bar area was small. and the money that they used was for the program and was for the facility. We don't invest in our programs and in our facilities. So when a young boy becomes 16, soccer's no longer interesting to him, is no longer, like playing first division now to a young boy is nothing. When I was growing up, it was like
everything.
And all be all. You know, and you look at the clubs that are successful now, they don't even have a club. PHC. Look at ABC Valencia, what Andrew is doing around Soldiers. They don't, there's no bar nowhere. BAA, the bar is behind the fence. So when you take your kid there, you know, the kid's not seeing the guys in the corner smoking or the guys in the bar drinking. I was having a conversation with Lou just now, and I was talking to Dennis Brown a while ago, and he had said something to me. We have up Somerset, when you're young, is a small window when you're under 16 or 15 where you go and you get soda, you're not allowed to go to the bar. And we was discussing it one day, and it was like a rite of passage because you could see right through the window and you see the bar, so you see, oh yeah, all right, those oldie ballers, all the older guys drinking. So we couldn't wait till we no longer had to go to the window where we could just go run and get a drink. So I think that we just spent a lot of money on the social aspect of clubs, and on top of that, there's been a lot of misappropriating of funds. Yeah. We have a club like Somerset and St. George's that's should have been paid for since donkey's years, that have cup matches generating $100-something million revenue over 2 days, and we can produce a good program, a good facility. We have 2 synthetic pitches in Bermuda. You travel anywhere in Europe or even South America, amateur facilities have synthetic pitches. And we wonder why it's not attractive. Or we leave Bermuda as a national team and we go overseas and we're not playing on these synthetic pitches or these good pitches, and we get over there and we're behind the 8 ball.
If I can jump in, healthy spaces to me, it means everything that you men have just been talking about. But what we would like to see as a community is, oftentimes we talk about SCARs, have our leaders SCARs trained, so that if somebody is interacting with young boys, we know that they understand all it is to protect our young men from the vulnerable individuals in our communities. It's financially being responsible, but also making those places healthy places for our young people. So really quick, 2 minutes, what does, if we had to, if I was coming to you as a parent and I were to say to you, what does a healthy club look like? And you gentlemen had to say to me as a parent, check these things out to make sure that's a healthy space for your child. What were the things that I as a parent would have to look for? There's some things as a parent in terms of healthy spaces.
Adult supervision, right from the start. From the time
adult supervision.
Adult supervision.
Okay.
Drug-free environment.
Drug-free?
Yeah, man. A safe environment. An environment where the child's whole character will be developed.
Holistic development.
Holistic development. And away from the distractions, the untoward distractions around that club. I see PHC youth every day when I'm driving to and fro. And I have some questions for you after, like, where do all those children come from? I said, who heard of them?
So guys, stay with me. Adult supervision, drug-free, holistic development. Anything else, Mrs. Simmons?
There's all of those things, but how does the profit margin of that club support and sustain itself as it also helps to build the community in which it sits?
A sustainable financial...
That's right.
Sustainable financial development. Anybody else?
No, just...
I would just agree with all what's been said. You know, personnel, I think you need to have strong individuals involved with your club. You got to have a system of checks and balances, definitely. And, you know, what I tell my members, what I tell my executive is that, yes, we're a sports club, but we're more than a sports club. If we're just focusing on sports, we're not fulfilling our purpose. You know, we should be about the community. And it goes back to what I was saying before. You know, it doesn't make no sense at all developing, you know, good football players if these guys are menaces to society. You know, you got to teach them character through football, through cricket. So that's what it is for me.
Okay, let me tell you what I have. Adult supervision, drug-free, holistic development, sustainable finances, strong leadership, and teach character. Is that fair? I know people are looking for tangible things to walk away with. Okay, last question. Is there enough culturally relevant information taught in the present educational system? And if not, how does that impact the self-image of young black Bermudian males? Again, is there enough culturally relevant information taught in the present educational systems? And if not, how does that impact the self-image of our young black Bermudian males? And that will be the last question for the...
Interesting question. Let me go there. Let's distinguish between the written curriculum and the taught curriculum. First of all, there is sufficient, to a large extent, consciously relevant material in the system. You can come down to the Department of Education and they have enough resources. Of course, there's never enough. The issue becomes whether or not the materials are used and whether or not the curriculum is adhered to with respect to content. A few years ago, I was on a panel, we were talking about social studies and the involvement of teachers, and I put the charge to the parents about getting involved and ensuring that their loved ones are being exposed to the relevant material that would assist in their development. We have to do a better job of evaluating and assessing the taught curriculum. The taught curriculum. We oftentimes hear about there's no black studies in the school system. They're not teaching it. There's no black studies in the system. It's there. It's whether or not the content is being delivered and whether or not we can uphold those who are expected to deliver it. That's the issue.
Anybody else? I guess we have an opportunity to take a question from the floor.
I just have one question I want to ask. Who's responsible for saying no to bringing in, saying no to bringing in a commissioner from overseas? Because it affects the entire community when we see this nonsense going on, yet there are educators in this community that I believe are more than capable of taking that position. Who is responsible for saying no? Who is drawing up the criteria? I'm sorry if I'm...
No, you're not saying nothing wrong. I just said it's a...
Responsible for drawing up the criteria for who gets hired.
I think I have the answer, but I think...
Who gets hired comes from a select committee involving your board, usually your PS, there's usually the people, human resource, usually it's someone independent of that body to be the objective voice. That's usually the people who go through the interviewing process. But to answer your question, the people are all out here. Yeah, we can say there's the committee, but like I said, there's been a reproduction of this. I'm 58, and I'm seeing it about 40 of my years of existence. So it isn't something
you see, to me,
that's new.
To me, it comes down to politics all the time. It comes down to politics. It's the same issue with the airport. The community is shouting out, we do not want this airport, but they're building the airport.
Okay.
So how can we stop this?
Well,
you're saying it's the community. If we need to rally and organize, then we need to do this. That's nonsense. I've lived longer than you do. And I've seen them bring in so many commissioners, and I don't see anything changing in the content of the education that we are.
Thank you. you so much for your comments. But we got time just for a really quick comment.
Very, very quick, not a comment, just a question. I'm astounded. Forgive me, I'm an American coming here, and I got to ask you 2 questions. Brother Lamb, I'm glad you're here. Number one, what kind of crimes are being committed that you have 98% of the people of color in your jails? And number 2, are you not worried then that if you have 98% of the people of color that are men in your jails, that you might be fostering an idea that you have to go to jail to get an education?
That has to be kept, again, 98%, but it has to be kept into perspective, the numbers. Most of the people in our jail are for acquisitive crimes, or crimes usually where they're stealing to support a drug habit. Now, clearly, we also have a growing population in jail that are for murder now, and I think, Mr. Lamb, how much is that number of individuals in jail for murder now?
About in excess of 30.
30, but most of
out of 180 inmates.
180 inmates. So we have to keep the number in perspective in terms of the local community. What I think the startling is not the number, is a percentage of those individuals who are black young men.
That's what I'm saying. You got 98%. Why is it amongst the panel, which is an august group of people, is your population to the degree where they think that the only way that they can make whatever they make, and I'm getting out of the way, to commit some sort of crime? I mean, I will talk later.
Can we have one opportunity for one of the panelists to answer that question, Madam Chair? Okay, one of those gentlemen would like to.
Was the question a rite of passage?
No, he said the question is, we have 98% of the men incarcerated are black males. Do they think that's the only way they can get attention, specifically education? And what are we doing to actually, I guess, lessen that percentile of individuals who are actually there?
No, the answer is not. The answer is no. They don't see the perceptionists come to jail to get a GED. There's a wide gamut of offenses that are created. I'll tell you what is on the rise in this country, is there's a higher number of sexual-related offenses going on in this country, and that's another conversation. A high number of sex-related offenses taking place in this country.
I see the DPP standing up, and I think, I have to call deference and give him an opportunity to speak, so I'm sure he's standing up with a point of clarification.
Well, not a point of clarification, but my name's Larry Musson, and I'm the chief prosecutor here in Bermuda, and I just want to tell a small story because I know we're out of time. In Bermuda, we've had for many years people who smoke marijuana at high school level, and then somewhere along the way, out of high school, they get caught by the police. And what we've done over many years is we put them in court. When I say we, the system has put them in court, and they've been prosecuted. In Bermuda, you get a criminal conviction. What we also have in Bermuda is the United States immigration, and in the United States immigration presence here. Like when you go back to the States, you'll get customs cleared here in Bermuda. But what happens is they put those people's names in the United States stop list. And so there are lots of people in Bermuda who have a conviction for something as simple as marijuana, who cannot travel to the United States for recreation or for education purposes. And they get hugely frustrated in life. So I've been appointed as the chief prosecutor just earlier this year. And one of the first things I did, because I have the authority under the law, is to make a decision about whether or not people will come to court for something as simple as prosecution for simple possession of cannabis. And I've made the decision that that's not going to happen anymore.
I just want to speak to that.
You can.
I'm actually. Just real quick. I had an experience maybe about 6 months ago. I've been clean 20 years now. Been on the stop list just as long, and done a lot of traveling. I have a waiver, so I had to apply for a waiver so that I could travel. About 5 months ago, I went Panama on business, and have been multiple times. And my past came back to haunt me. They actually detained me. Now I work in a drug rehabilitation center. Been working there for 16 years. They actually held me in Panama, detained me overnight, and sent me back to Miami, to Bermuda, because of a 20-year-old conviction for a joint of marijuana in Bermuda. 20 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, to paraphrase one of my...
Good afternoon. My name is D'Amico Dublin, speaking on behalf of the Right Living House. Just something I want to bring to your general reading. She talked about empowering young black people, and Mr. Liam sort of touched on this, emotions. I think first we should deal with the emotional state that as young black men we're in. Because I am a young black man, and I'm helping destroy the community. And now I'm trying to help rebuild the community. Mr. Tankard also talked about a higher consciousness. And that's why I said the emotional state, what we're gonna feel. How would I feel knowing that something you all cherish, I'm helping destroy? You know? How can we make it somewhere if we don't even know who we are? You even talked about molding. So you could talk about constructing or shaping young black men to be what you want. But every mold has a purpose. If you wet clay, clay knows that it's meant to form. And once dry, it hardens. But if we don't know what we're meant to shape to be, how can we even achieve anything? Because I was once one of them people sitting on the wall, selling drugs, partaking in illegal activities. And now I am incarcerated due to my actions, you know? And my emotional state. Where is it that somebody takes time to see the emotional state that I'm going through this higher consciousness? Because that's where it starts, the emotional state that we're in as young black people that don't know nothing. We don't know where we came from. We don't know where we're going. But in these streets, we know what's promised to us. So what is the promises society has for us? Because in the end, we need something to look forward to. A bit of motivation. They talked about a pipeline. People going into these schools and the communities. And I advocate for that. We need people to reach out to us and touch our hearts. Because many of us don't even know if we still have hearts. That's just something I wanted to give you.
John?
Good afternoon, you all. My name is Stanford Archibald, and I'm from the Right Living House as well. I want to, because I'm a little disappointed when you start talking about colonialization of young males. It's rooted in racism, and not the overt racism of slavery or anything. It's an institutionalized racism that defranchises black males, that takes away the identity of black males. Thus you heard evidence of it just now. But the more insidious and pernicious outcome of institutional racism is being subservient. Colonialism doesn't teach us to strive for excellence and be inspired by excellence. It diminishes us to a state of mediocrity, and we accept that mediocrity as excellence. We see this permeating in the education system. We see it permeating through our whole society. We no longer hold a standard of excellence. We diminish our standard of excellence so other people could meet that standard. So if we're going to grow as a community, we have to deal with the real issues. We have to speak of the real issues. And we have to deal with institutionalized racism that prevents black Bermudians, qualified Bermudians, from taking the position because you're always told you're not good enough. But an Englishman would have the same qualifications that you have, and is worthy. And we become subservient with them same qualifications, and we bow to that person instead of being emboldened, because we are on the same equal playing field.
Thank you so much.
So we as a community, we as a society, we've got to think of what paradigm we're going to embrace. Are we going to embrace excellence? Are we going to be inspired by excellence? Are we going to thrive for excellence? And are we going to teach our children excellence?
I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you do me the honor of putting our hands together for our esteemed panel? In closing, I'll paraphrase my favorite poet, Robert Frost. The woods are dark and cold and deep. We have many miles to go and promises to keep before we can truly sleep. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.